Hello, this is the Private Investigator Experience Podcast, and I'm your host, Phil Little. On this channel, we talk about the cases and life of a private investigator. Then I look out around the world using my investigative lens, which has been honed from my military, law enforcement, intelligence service, and global security background. Then I add just a bunch of my biblical worldview to come up with solutions about uh, things that would help my clients and help the public good if I have information that would do that. I just want to share in my business from my military days in the Air Force. It was prevention. Never assume anything. I learned as a young investigator. I just did this amazing AdWord post, 25 minutes. I didn't check my mic and before that I started the post because I'd used it. It's always worked. I assumed that it was on this time. And I got through with this post, which I really liked, and nothing, no sound. So I checked it this time. And that's a reminder for all of us. Don't assume anything when it comes to our security and protecting our home, our families, and our businesses and our friends. I started out in law enforcement, and after I was law enforcement, got involved in the private sector. And from that time, early on, I was encouraged to build intelligence files. And I started doing that as a one-man operation after I'd left the Air Force. I was up in George Air Force Base. It's not there anymore, but it was at that time. And I moved down to Los Angeles and started Bill Little Investigations, a one-man operation. I had set up an office for those that might be around that area, Lancashire Boulevard and Vineland, right on the corner there. And I can't believe I still remember this man's name, Fred Murphy. He had a moving and storage facility there where they stored furniture. And it was a pretty good site. It wasn't huge, but they had a lot of containers and boxes in there. And along one side, there was a stairs that went up to this kind of alcove up there, alcove. And it was partially open. And Fred rented that to me for cheap. I don't know, just a few bucks a month. And I set up my first office there. That was where the Little Investigations was started. And I was in that general area until 1977. Prior to that, I had opened an office, moved out of that, moving to storage, and I was at 5000 Lancashire in an office building there and had an office in there and a part-time assistant that would come in and had some part-time guys working on cases. And I was there until I took over West Coast Detectives, bought it and became the chief in 1977. All through that time, I was building intelligence files. Even while I was doing local work, while I was working on all kinds of civil and criminal cases and a lot of accident work. And so when I took over West Coast Detectives, I was able, we had a national operation. Stanley Comstock, who I'd taken the agency over from, had been there since the 50s. He had become partners with the widow of the founder after he'd passed away. And he built that agency up in the 50s, 60s, into the 70s. He was one of those that was a pioneer in polygraph. He became a expert examiner and helped develop that to become accepted in court. And so when he was ready to retire, I took it over. And that gave me the opportunity to expand even further. I had interest and relationships out around the world. So over those next years, I built an international intelligence gathering operation. I had human assets on the ground across Europe, the Middle East, the Arabian Gulf, Latin America, and the Far East, working out of Hong Kong, where I had a physical office in Hong Kong. And then we had stations across various countries out of that region. And our whole purpose was to gather information that we could advise our clients if it was safe to set up in whatever country they wanted to go into. The only way to ensure that was to have human assets on the ground. And these were people I would recruited from friends and relationships like in Europe. Mine started with a relationship of a man and a family who was close to that was one of the managers at French National Police. And he introduced me and exposed me to people across Europe in his back area. And so it was that kind of around the world as things began to develop. And I had this intelligence gathering operation, which after 9/11, I had some interest from various sources because I had apparently human assets in areas that even our government didn't have. The difference in why this worked, I was working under, you might call commercial cover. I was a commercial operation. I developed these individuals as part-time consultants, which they could legally do. And when I asked them for information about would it be safe for our client to set up there, what was the country like? Did they like Americans? How were Americans looked at? Would it be safe for family members? And what was the government like? Was the likelihood of a coup, a military takeover, a change in government where they would nationalize foreign companies? We needed to know the stability of the government, what they were thinking, what they were planning. And these people that I had on board had access to that. And they provided all that to me. Now, if they'd been recruited by a government agency as a spy, and they had done that, they would have been guilty of treason and subject to death in many countries. But for me, they weren't, didn't have that problem. So even though I wasn't particularly seeking that political information that our government intelligence agencies around the world salivate about and are intensely looking for, but I was getting it. And so I had a lot of good information. And now the difference between covert and commercial cover has some very different components to it. I've met intelligence operatives from all over the world in various intelligence services, and they all think the same way. Their way is the only way, covert, and they're secretive. They never go to the same places twice. They don't set up relationships at restaurants to take the same target, different targets to the same place. And if you really watch and observe those people, you can determine that they're a foreign asset. It's not that difficult. But in commercial cover, I went to the same locations. I developed relationships. I became known. I took multiple targets that I was working on to the same restaurants. People knew me. I had an acceptance. I wanted people to understand that I was real, I was around, and I was going to be around. So they wanted to be involved with me. And then I was able to establish all these relationships without any problem on their part. And they gave me access to the things I needed to get to our clients that could help them decide if they were going into this country, and they would be secure in doing that. You know, as I traveled the world, I had been accused of being a CIA front or operation. I know hundreds of times. Everywhere I would go, after I got acquainted and started talking, and they looked. Of course, I had an old company. West Coast Detectives was founded in 1922. We weren't some startup consulting firm that an intelligence agency might have to try to set up a kind of camouflage somewhat. Excuse me here. And the problems really became much more apparent as into that early 2000s when the biometrics started happening. As an example, intelligence agents from any of the governments, they might have numerous, three, four, five, six different covers. They had passports, they would have credit cards, they would have all the stuff. And they would go in and out of countries under different names at different times. When the countries started using biometrics, that all stopped. Because if a agent went in there one time with a cover and they came back the next time with another cover, they were flagged. They were dead in the water. So that created a real problem where many intelligence agencies started trying to set up commercial operations that their people would use true name, but they would be supposedly working for this private company. Those things sometimes were so apparent what they were doing. There would be government agencies that would set up. I found one that was 100 people at the same address and same location, and I broke it so easily. So if I could do that, I knew the bad guys could do that. So I wanted to expand our operation, which I did through that intelligence gathering mechanism that we have. And there's a couple of situations that I remember so vividly. One time in Paris, we were returning with a group. I'd taken a group on a ministry team to a youth conference in Germany. And we came back and stopped in Paris for 3 days. And it was my birthday. And there were two of the girls with us that were actresses. One was a singer, also our worship leader for that team. And they told me on my birthday, we want to take you out tonight, someplace. So they had checked on the club from the concierge in the hotel. And we got all decked up. I was in a Versace suit. They were decked out, two beautiful women. And we went to this club. It had a stairs going down, and it was totally French. People were dressed, all women elegantly, men suit and ties. It was an upscale place. We were the only Americans in there. And here I come down the stairs with these two beautiful women. We got some attention. We sat down at a table. One of the girls went up to the bar to get drinks, and she came back with two guys in tow and the drinks. And they wanted to get acquainted, mainly because I had these two beautiful women with me. But as it developed, I found some similarities. This man was French, Syrian background, he was French citizen. It was amazing the background of his that was something I was looking for. And we developed this relationship. And ironically, tell you how small a world it is. Later on, this man told me, and then I went back and checked our files and found out. He said some years before that, he had had some issues in the States with somebody that needed checking out. And he had talked to somebody to Saudi Arabian Council in Los Angeles, and they had referred him to West Coast detectives because we were doing work for the consulate office in various things. And this man that we met by chance by going down the stairs with two beautiful women in Paris had been a client of West Coast detectives many years before. You talk about a small world. Coincidence? I don't know. But from that, I was able to develop many relationships ongoing, and still today they are attached. And one of the times after we had met, and I was there in and out of Paris, so I was at a dinner with him and his girlfriend at that time, who later he married, a girl from one of the Slavic countries. I forgot now. Beautiful lady. And sitting at dinner, he just looked across at me, just out of the blue, and said, "You're CIA, aren't you?" And I looked at, I'd been asked that hundreds of times. I said, "You know what? They can't afford me." And then, passed it off and, oh, okay. And then when I brought that man to Los Angeles to visit us and wine and dine and build further relationships later on, he had told me, he said, my friends in Syria says you're CIA. But I know after being here and seeing the trappings you have, I had a limo, I had some pretty good trappings, and took him out all over the place. He said, I know, there's no way. I said, yeah, you're right. They couldn't afford me. So all these things would happen, and I survived. I worked out around the world and started my work in Israel, which I've shared before about in southern Lebanon and northern Israel. And then later on, got involved in the Gulf and had a station and office in Saudi Arabia in Riyadh, developed close relationships there. And so I've been blessed, by that. Now, I don't think, and the purpose of this particular post is we've had over 150,000 cases in the last 103 years. And I've talked about the cases. And after a while, they're all similar. They have different people, of course, some different ingredients. But I said, keep talking about cases, but this doesn't seem to be something that keeps my passions going. But when I look at what's going on around the world from my investigating lens, relationships I built, and then from my biblical worldview of looking at the Bible and understanding what the Bible says. And now, interesting, you might say, I don't believe in the Bible. I don't believe in God. Okay. There was a survey done recently that asked people around the world, not only in the United States, what book do you consider the most religious book? 80% of those people said the Bible. 8% said the Quran. So 80%, oh, excuse me, of people around the world saw the Bible as being important. And so for me, it's become very important because I'm an optimist. But folks, there's not going to be peace in the Middle East. It isn't in the cards. This has been there since all the way back to Abraham and Ishmael, his son, the illiterate son or the illegitimate son of Abraham. So I understand that President Trump wants peace. He wants to see people not be killed, as all of us do. But we also have to be realistic. Hamas is not going to disarm. Right now, they're using this time to try to get their team back in place in the part of Gaza they're holding. They're killing indiscriminately people they deem to have been supporters of Israel or other factions, Christians. They're actually Christians in Gaza that have been praying and holding on as much as they can. They're trying to stay in power. Qatar or Qatar, for all the great friends of mine I have in the Arab world, Qatar is not a friend of Israel, never will be. They support Hamas, which is part of the Muslim Brotherhood, came from that. And they are supporting them. Now they're supporting them. And I understand President Trump, when he talks to people out around the world, he's praising them. That's good psychology. Tell them, man, we got some great leaders around the world when President Trump meets them. And yeah, we have an issue there with Qatar because we have a huge installation there, massive assets. Where would we go with that? We really couldn't go into Saudi Arabia with that. Yeah, I mean, possibly it might work now with the current leadership, but Bahrain, we've got a big Navy base there, so that won't work. So where would we go? So I get that they're important to us in our national interest, but I hope this is his political approach, but he's not naive about what really is under the sand, so to speak. Here, as an example, Egypt has outlawed the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas. The spring of that, they won't allow them in their country, so they know how evil they are and what they intend to do. So the only way we can understand why is the Bible important? And the fact that it's been the most sold book in all of history. In fact, there's been a massive resurgence of Bible purchases since Charlie Kirk was assassinated, which is interesting within itself. People are beginning to wonder what really is going on. The violence has gotten out of hand, folks, in our country. Most people don't realize how far we have gone down the road to losing our freedoms in the United States of America. People were just, even church people go to church. Oh, they're busy. We got a life. We'll keep our heads down. We'll stay in the church. Maybe everything will be okay. And that's what that evil left radical side says. And they're hoping that we will continue to do that. We're being deceived, folks. This is not Democrat, Republican, Independent. This is not about race. I have great friends in Israel. My background is all over there. Great Christian friends. I have great Arab friends. And and we can talk about and those Arab friends, those Jewish friends, those Christian, we all have the same basic desire, even though our religion is a little different. And I don't try to force my religion on people in Saudi Arabia. I realize the laws there. I'm not there to do that. But if someone asks me, which has happens over and over again, what is there about Jesus? What's going on with this? What's going on with your religion? Then I have the freedom to tell them. But I love them. I care about them. I went there to help and help stop terrorism. And I went there for a purpose, not to try to change them. And I was told so many times in Saudi Arabia, we like, Bill, the fact that you came here, you have a place, and we had a villa there, we had an office. And when so many Americans or foreigners, Westerns would come, they wanted to set up in Bahrain or Dubai where they could party and have all of the worldly things available, but they wanted to come to Saudi Arabia and make money. And I didn't do that. So I respect people. I like and I love people. I would love everybody to know the Lord Jesus Christ as I know him and the God of heaven who created all this stuff. I love that. But I'm not going to force it on anyone. And I'm sure not going to go out and kill people that don't believe like I do. So the Bible is important because it tells us what's going to happen. The reason I can have peace and joy with what I see going on in the world, in the Middle East, in Russia, and the slaughtering of Christians in Africa by Islamic terrorists. You don't hear about it. The world is silent. The press is silent. Although some little things happen. Israel, documented, has done more to protect civilians than any war of any country, including the United States, has ever done. But let the world press come at Israel and forgetting about those thousands and hundreds of thousands, and yes, even to the millions of people being slaughtered in Africa or in China. And there's a repression now being increased to the church in China recently. And touching on that, Xi Jinping isn't going to make a deal that he will stand by. Oh, he might sign some agreements, but not once have they ever lived up to them. And he will, I know Putin is doing the same thing. They're pumping up President Trump. They're feeding his ego, making him feel how great he is. And Russia has done this. Putin is a master KGB guy. These old intelligence guys, I don't care what country they're from, they're good. And he's using that. And with Trump's, and I mean, Trump's got to be political. I understand that. We have to talk nice to people. Behind the scenes, I hope he's being much more pointed. I know he's encouraging everywhere he meets every leader how great they are. And there's a benefit to that. But we also don't need to be naive and let that be our foreign policy. We need to understand what's going on in Gaza. It's been there since Abraham, as I mentioned. It's not going to change. And we need to be aware of that. What's the thing that's made me a better investigator has been when I have my Bible and biblical worldview, understanding of the Bible, where as an investigator, I've got a chief investigator. So when I get up against the wall and I don't know what to ask in an interrogation, so many times as I'm sitting there looking at a suspect who won't cave, who won't confess, even though maybe I've had undercover reports that I told him on this is such a day, time, and place you were driving down the street in this truck. And they'll sometimes look, and sometimes they'll, well, how did you know that? I said, we've been waking you up and putting you to bed for months now. And they would cave and tell him. But sometimes they don't. And then I would have times when I'm just sitting there looking at him, and this thought would come into my mind. I'd be praying. I'd say, God, I don't know what to do here. If something doesn't change, we're going to lose this one. And a thought would come into my mind. Ask this. And I would ask that question. And the people would just go, how did you know? And I now just tell me the rest of the story. How did it start? What got you started? You were a good employee here if I was a company. So knowing and understanding the Bible, now revelations in the Bible is revelation. It's telling us, yeah, there's a lot about war and killing there. The message is there's hope. You know, Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior. There's hope. And we know the end and what the end chapter is going to be. And we can see these things shaping up right now. You know, there was a study recently. I was listening to from some of the biblical organizations and printers that right now, off the top of my head, I'm just thinking about this, so I don't remember the exact percentage we're at. We are so close to having every person in the world being able to somehow hear the message of the Bible, either through radio, shortwave, TV, written word. We're so close to that. What is left is so small. And the Bible says that one way we can know about the end time, when this world's going to come to an end, and it will come to an end, is when every person I have seen, every ear has heard, excuse me, the message of the Bible to them. Now, there's so much more we can talk about, but I'm asking you, get involved. Become your own investigator. Investigate the truth, not your truth, not somebody else's truth, the truth. And knowing the truth will set you free. Find out what's going on. Stand up. Get involved in your local community. Stand up for children not being indoctrinated by gender confusion and all this. About criminals not being released back onto the street without bail. And so many issues. Find out what's going on in your community and get involved. Stand up, be counted. And I declare that we can still make a difference. I believe we can still turn this country back to God and how we were founded and out of the hands of the radical groups that want to make us into a totalitarian state. Leave a comment on any of the platforms. So you can email me at pi777 at gmail.com. Remember, this is the time for you and I to step out of the crowd. And if you have a problem or in your business or family, and you say, can a private investigator help me? Send me that in a summary, pi777 at gmail.com, and I'll let you know if an investigator could help. Remember, it's up to you and I. This is our watch. This is our time to make sure our country stays safe. We can't stand on the shoulders of those who've gone before us, who have died in the ultimate sacrifice. In our generation, we have to win the fight again, or we will fall. God bless you. God bless your family. And may God bless America. Stay safe. See you next time.